We're going to be reading this morning from Matthew chapter 5. I'm going to be reading verses 1 through 16 this morning, and I'm going to be reading from the Common English Bible version, and the words will be up on the screen as well. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up a mountain. He sat down, and his disciples came to him. He taught them, saying, "Happy are people who are hopeless, because the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Happy are people who grieve, because they will be made glad. Happy are people who are humble, because they will inherit the earth. Happy are people who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, because they will be fed until they are full. Happy are people who show mercy, because they will receive mercy. Happy are people who have pure hearts, because they will see God. Happy are people who make peace, because they will be called God's children. Happy are people whose lives are harassed because they are righteous, because the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Happy are you when people insult you and harass you and speak all kinds of bad and false things about you, all because of me. Be full of joy and be glad, because you have a great reward in heaven. In the same way, people harass the prophets who came before you. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt loses its saltiness, how will it become salty again? It's good for nothing except to be thrown away and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city on top of a hill can't be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a basket. Instead, they put it on top of a lampstand, and it shines on all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before people, so they can see the good things you do and praise your Father who is in heaven." So, the year was 1983, and 5-year-old Eric Smith was all about one thing, and that thing was He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Some fans, got a couple fans out there, all right? Every day, I would come home from school, 4 o'clock would roll around, and I would be in front of my television. Now, this was back in the days when things came on at a certain time, at a certain channel, and you had to sit in front of the TV at that time, and if you weren't there at that time, you just didn't get to see that thing. Like, maybe it would come on in reruns eventually at some point, but you can't just like find it online. Like, you just had to wait for it to come back again. So Monday through Friday, 4 o'clock, I am parked in front of the TV to watch He-Man and Battle Cat and his friends take on the evil forces of Skeletor. But here's the thing, you may or may not know this, He-Man was not just a TV show. He-Man was actually the first nationally syndicated TV show to be based on a line of toys. That's right, toys. So, of course, watching the show, is not enough. I had to have the toys, right? And it started with the action figures. There they are. I had them all. He-Man, of course, Battle Cat, and Skeletor, of course, Man-at-Arms, and Beast-Man. It was actually really hard to find. My mom went through a lot of effort to find Beast-Man for me for either Christmas or birthday. I can't remember which it was. The comic relief magician named Orko. I had them all. But the action figures were not the end. A little while later, Mattel, the company behind all this, would release the Castle Grayskull playset. And I was like, I had to have it. Had to have it. This is the main fortress for the good guys. It had the drawbridge that opened up. You would open it up and you could play with the guys inside. There was the throne room. It had the trap door where bad guys would fall down into the dungeon. And I had to have it. And then I got it. But then, Mattel, these evil geniuses, released Snake Mountain. the Snake Mountain playset. Castle Grayskull, that's the lair for the good guys. Snake Mountain is the lair for the bad guys. And Snake Mountain had all the same types of things that Castle Grayskull did, except it also had a working microphone. Yep, I know. Technology. It was, you could make Castle Grayskull make all the chilling noises that like Snake Mountain would make. And as the heroes and villains battled. Speaking of battle, it was not the end. Mattel was not done. A little later, they released Battle Armor He-Man and Battle Armor Skeletor. So I know what you might be thinking, Eric, you already have He-Man and Skeletor action figures. Why would you want these? Well, let me tell you. Are they almost identical to the ones I already have? Yes, they are. But these ones have these little spinning cylinders inside their chests. And when you have one action figure hit the other action figure in just like it had to be perfect, like just the right way, a dent would show up on their armor. And then you would hit him again and another dent would show up. Have a look. This just show you what I'm talking about.
He-Man. Beastman so mad for Battle Armor He-Man.
Beastman, Battle Armor He-Man, and Skeletor each sold separately.
Take that! Just a dent. And that! More dents. But look! They're gone! Only He-Man has this power. Oh, yeah? Battle Armor Skeletor has it, too. Now the real fun begins.
Battle Armor Skeletor and He-Man figures each sold separately from the Masters of the Universe collection. Beastman figure also sold separately from Mattel.
Oh, gosh, the technology was unbelievable. This 1983 technology. This is amazing. How is this possible? There were dents there, and then the dents were gone. Unbelievable. But here's the thing, and you're probably picking up on the pattern of 5-year-old Eric's life up until this point. It didn't matter. Didn't matter what new He-Man toy I got. I would eventually be bored with it, and then a new thing would come out. And not only would I be bored with what I had, I would be sad about the new stuff that I didn't have. Mattel was never done producing things to make me happy. And my bottomless pit of wants was always in need of something new to make me happy. My desire for He-Man toys could never be fully satisfied. I would always end up bored with what I had and sad about the things that I didn't have. And I'm sure many of us have experienced many of the same things as kids. Or, we all probably have the toy that we think of growing up. A little while after He-Man, it was like Thundercats and then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And, and then we become adults and then there's just new things. It's the pursuit of happiness. And it's a pursuit that likely continues throughout our entire lives. Happiness in more toys, happiness in more money, happiness in the perfect family or a clean house or a bigger job title. But no matter what it is, and no matter what we achieve, the novelty always wears off. And discontent sets in, and we need the next thing, and we are bored and sad until we get it. This pursuit of happiness is fueling a profound sadness that plagues much of our world. And this truth gets at the big idea that's going to be the focus of our 4th week in our series, American Creeds, that we've been going through. And the big idea is this: few things are more sad than a life lived in the relentless pursuit of happiness. So in this series, American Creeds, we've been looking at common beliefs that Americans have, including many of us American Christians, and we've been evaluating them. And we've been asking questions of if and how these creeds that we hold to, how do they fit? Do they fit, and how do they fit with being followers of Jesus? Excuse me. In week 1, Dave looked at the creed, Speak Your Truth, and reminded us of the importance of speaking God's truth in love. In week 2, Andrew spoke to us about the creed of, I am the boss. I'm the boss of my life. I'm the master of my life. And reminded us of God's call to humbly submit to him as the master of our lives. And just a couple of weeks ago in week 3, Gene spoke to us about the creed, I am enough, and reminded us that it is God who is enough for us, and in him we find everything that we need. And the creed that we're going to be focusing on here in week 4 is that we should always just do what makes you happy, or pursue your happiness. And all of these creeds, there's been a truth that's been true of all of these creeds that we've been looking at, and it's true today, is that there is a kernel of truth to be found in all of these creeds. And the kernel of truth here is that the reality is there's nothing wrong with happiness. There's nothing wrong with wanting happiness. There's nothing wrong with hoping that we have happy lives. I would imagine if we were to leave here today and I asked each and every one of you on the way out if you would rather be happy today or would you rather be miserable today, I am guessing that at least most of you would choose happiness. So there's nothing wrong, there's nothing inherently wrong with wanting to be happy or choosing to do things that make us happy. But where it becomes a problem is when we move away from just, I would like to be happy, to we prioritize and pursue happiness as a goal of our lives, where happiness becomes the main focus of our lives. Now, you might hear that and you might immediately want to push back and think, Eric, what's wrong with pursuing happiness? I mean, it's kind of who we are. I mean, we're Americans. It's written into like our founding documents, the very document that established ourselves as an independent nation says this: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're Americans. We're also Pennsylvanians. You enter the state of Pennsylvania, and what are the first words that you read? Welcome to Pennsylvania. Pursue your happiness. It seems that happiness as a goal is pretty foundational to who we are. So, why is it a problem? Why does the relentless pursuit of happiness as a goal lead to so much sadness? And I think there are 4 reasons that I'd like us to spend some time thinking about this morning. And the first is that when we pursue happiness, we're pursuing a moving target. So let me see if I can flush this out a little bit as we talk. And I'm sure we've all experienced things like this. It's kind of like my He-Man experience. We feel unhappy. We identify something that's the source of that unhappiness. We figure out something that addresses the source of that unhappiness, and then we feel happy until a new source of unhappiness comes along, and we transfer the target of our unhappiness to this new thing, and we need to pursue that. We had an example of this come up in our house just this past week. Now, if you have a teen or preteen daughter, there's probably, and I did ask Anna's permission before sharing this story, just so you know. But in November of 2022, she may have lost her mind a little bit, or been a little bit on edge, because that was when tickets went on sale for the Taylor Swift Eras Tour. And when tickets went live for this tour, the volume of people trying to buy tickets literally broke Ticketmaster. Within an hour of the ticket sales going live, the site crashed and was down. 2.4 million tickets were sold, breaking the record for the highest single-day ticket sales of any artist in the history of music. Social media sites were inundated with angry posts from fans who waited hours and hours in virtual lines to get tickets. And if you have a Taylor Swift fan in your house and you were lucky enough to get tickets, the level of excitement and happiness in your house was probably significant, to say the least. And the concert wasn't even happening for another 6 months at that point. It wasn't until May. Well, our daughter Anna was one of the lucky ones to have tickets to the concert. And fast forward, the concert happens, and they have an amazing time. Memories are made. Fast forward to now, all right? So we're like a year or so after the concert has actually happened. Taylor Swift has released a new album. And the Eras Tour is still going on. And Anna comes downstairs one morning this week and says, "Dad, my day is ruined." she said, Taylor Swift updated her set list for the Eras Tour, and she's singing songs from her new album, and I'm not going to get to hear them. Now, her "my day is ruined" comment was more for humor's sake than anything else. Unfortunately, Anna is not really letting this new information ruin the memories or her experiences at the concert, and she's still very thankful she had the opportunity to go. But you can see how easy it is when happiness is our goal for it to fade as we identify a new target to pursue to make us happy. Because happiness is a moving target, and it's moving because we aren't really pursuing something tangible. What we're pursuing is a feeling, which is the second reason pursuing happiness ultimately leads to sadness. We base our evaluation of whether or not we have attained happiness on whether we are currently experiencing pleasant feelings or not. And the problem with this, of course, is that then we tend to avoid things that are associated with unpleasant feelings and gravitate toward things that are associated with pleasant feelings. And of course, the problem with that is that there are so many things in life that feel unpleasant, but are actually a big part of long-term well-being and ultimately long-term real happiness in life. Again, I can turn to something going on in our lives as parents right now as an example of this. In just a little over 3 months, we're going to be sending our daughter off to Michigan to go to college, and next year we'll be doing the same thing with my son, and for where he decides to go. And I'll tell you, this is something that's going to feel terrible in those moments. To leave my kids, who have lived and been around me for 18 years, somewhere to begin living apart from me. What would make me happy, what would feel good in that moment is to keep them nearby, to keep hanging out, to keep going to the movies, to keep going on trips together, keep playing games, keep watching shows together. If my happiness in the moment was my ultimate goal, that's what I'd want. Because it's about how I feel, not about what's right. But I also know that if I made that choice, it wouldn't really last, because when we pursue happiness as a goal, not only are we pursuing a feeling, but we're pursuing something that by its very nature is temporary. When we look at something or some circumstance or some person as the source of pleasant feelings in our lives, eventually those feelings will fade. And as the novelty wears off, we just want something more. But not just more of the same things. We want more of something different. Because we've already had what we have. And that doesn't make us happy anymore. We need something new. A new job, a new car, a new house, a new spouse. I can't tell you how many marriages over the years of people that I know have ended because one or both partners said something like, "I'm just not happy anymore," or "Don't I deserve to be happy? I just want to be happy." So we move on to something new. And the problem with the new is that just still gets old. And oftentimes quicker than the last new thing that we had in our lives. Because when we pursue happiness, we're also pursuing something with diminishing returns. Do you know the reason why the pursuit of happiness leads to a need for newer and newer and more to achieve happiness? Actually, it has a lot to do with the way our brain works. When something makes us happy or excited, our brain experiences what's called a dopamine spike, which makes us then want more of that thing that made us excited or happy. But when happiness is our primary goal, we're basically chasing repeated dopamine spikes in our brain. And when dopamine levels spike constantly in our brain, what happens is the brain may actually respond by reducing the number of dopamine receptors available in your brain, which can actually then diminish the feelings of happiness that you get from some of the same experiences. And this could lead to what's called a dopamine dip, meaning you actually start to feel sad instead of happy because you're not getting the same spike that you got previously. For example, someone who becomes addicted to online shopping may eventually lose interest in those new packages showing up, but they're still driven and compelled to buy more, to chase that diminishing dopamine spike. Our brains are literally designed to make the pursuit of happiness as a goal unsatisfying and an unfulfilling quest in our lives. And if brain chemistry doesn't do it for you, to drive this point home, we can also look to one of the richest, wisest, most successful men who ever lived. If we look to Solomon, as he wrote in the book of Ecclesiastes, as he chased happiness in countless ways. And in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, we see him pursuing happiness in pleasure, in laughter, in wine, in wisdom, in building huge homes, in planting beautiful vineyards, increasing his wealth, hiring entertainers and having servants of all kinds, increasing his family, marrying more women. And he would eventually say in Ecclesiastes 2, he said, anything I wanted, I would take. I denied myself no pleasure. And all this, his ultimate conclusion was this. As I looked at everything I had worked so hard to accomplish, it was all so meaningless. Like chasing the wind, there was nothing really worthwhile anywhere. Talk about a dopamine dip. So at this point, you may be saying, okay, so the more I pursue happiness, the more it leads to unhappiness. Am I supposed to just not want happiness and just never be happy? Is it possible then for anyone to be happy? And the answer to that, of course, is of course. I'm sure there are happy people. There are happy people here. Perhaps you're generally happy. You know genuinely happy people. But where does that come from? And the answer is that genuine happiness comes not as a goal, but as a byproduct. Have a look at the list again of happy and blessed people that Jesus references in Matthew 5. He says, happy are those whose hope is in God, who are comforted when they mourn, who are humble, who hunger and thirst for justice, who are merciful, whose hearts are pure, people who work for peace, who are persecuted for doing what is right. All of these people that Jesus references are pursuing things other than happiness, things greater than happiness. And some of them are even suffering because of those pursuits. But Jesus still calls them happy and blessed. And when I think about some of the happiest experiences in my life, they are often about so much more than, they're always about so much more than just the pursuit of happiness itself. We recently just wrapped up a month-long missions conference here at Grace, where we heard from all of the missionary partners that we support, and then we heard from some folks right here in our own church who have participated in short-term missions over the years. And they talked about the joy and happiness connected with those experiences. But you know what? Short-term missions trips are hard. It's long days of uncomfortable travel. The trips that we were on, that we were hot, you're sweaty and you're uncomfortable all day, crammed into a bus, driving on some pretty treacherous roads. We're often in places where we didn't speak the language, so communication is difficult. Navigating an unfamiliar culture in an unfamiliar community, it's anxiety-inducing, and it's also awesome. And it's one of my absolute favorite experiences in life. And the writer of Hebrews talks to us about Jesus himself finding hardship, finding happiness in the midst of hardship and suffering when he wrote these words, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Okay, so we're saying happiness is a byproduct. But a byproduct of what? You might be thinking to yourself, this all is kind of feeling very vague and nebulous. What is it that I'm supposed to be pursuing if I'm not pursuing happiness? And I think Jesus starts to get at this in these next few verses in Matthew chapter 5, after listing all the different categories of people that he is identifying as happy and blessed. Have a look at verses 13 through 16 again of Matthew chapter 5. He says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt loses its saltiness, how will it become salty again? It's good for nothing, except to be thrown away and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city on top of a hill can't be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a basket. Instead, they put it on top of a lampstand, and it shines on all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before people so they can see the good things you do and praise your Father who is in heaven." Jesus gets into this discussion of salt and light right on the heels of this list of blessed people. And you know what's something interesting that salt and light have in common? That they are two things that are absolutely meaningless apart from the way they impact and interact with other things in the world. Think about it. What does salt do? It flavors things. It preserves things. In biblical times, it was also used as a disinfectant. What does light do? It illuminates things by shining on them. Light is meant to shine and illuminate things. Salt is meant to salt stuff. They have things I don't know how you say that. They have things that they're meant to do. So what is happiness a byproduct of? Meaning. Happiness is a byproduct of being who and what you were meant to be. Just like salt and light. I like the way Tim Keller speaks about this. He says, "The problem is that contemporary people think life is all about finding happiness. We decide what conditions will make us happy, and then we work to bring those conditions about. To live for happiness means that you are trying to get something out of life. But when suffering comes along, it takes the conditions for happiness away. And so suffering destroys all reason to keep living. But to live for meaning means not that you try to get something out of life, but rather that life expects something from us. In other words, you have meaning only when there is something in life more important than your own personal freedom and happiness. Something for which you are glad to sacrifice your happiness. But what also tends to come along with that meaning is happiness. Which raises the question then, okay, so where do I find this meaning? Do I just decide on it? Do I just create it for myself? And I'd argue no, because I think really that's just another way of pursuing our own happiness. We just end up in that same cycle of happiness and boredom and sadness and despair and more happiness. Meaning implies that we were meant for something from the very beginning. And it is living out that purpose that we discover the wholeness and the completeness that really Jesus defines as happiness. We are meant for certain things as human beings. We are meant for an intimate and growing relationship with our Creator, a relationship that Jesus makes possible through his death and resurrection, allowing us to be forgiven, allowing us to be made whole and reconciled to God. We are meant to be image bearers of God in the world and representatives of Jesus as his ambassadors. We are meant for community with each other as we encourage and challenge and uplift each other. And it is only through living out our meaning that we can truly experience the byproduct of that meaning, which is genuine happiness. But before we close, though, I want to address maybe one possible objection that maybe some here might be thinking. And you might be thinking, okay, Eric, I've been listening to you talk for quite a while now. And you might be thinking, I'm hearing you talk about how sad the pursuit of happiness is, but you know what? I'm actually pretty content. I'm all about pursuing my own happiness, and I'm kind of okay with that. And I want to respond to that with maybe another story from my life as a kid. If you ever talk to my mom, she will tell you that I was an incredibly picky eater growing up. If you talk to people that know me now, they might tell you that I'm an incredible, but I was 100 times worse, if you could imagine that, as a kid. And to give you an idea of how bad it was, I wouldn't eat bacon as a kid. It's crazy. I know, right? Unbelievable. I spent a lot of the years of my life, well into like early adolescence, really, that I would refuse to eat bacon. I don't know what it was. It just kind of like looked gross to me. Then one day, one magical day, I decided I would try it. And a whole new world opened up to me. Not the healthiest world, but a whole new one. And it was like, oh, this is what everybody's been talking about. You know, you can live without salt and light. And if you've never, your taste buds maybe will get used to bland food. Your eyes can adjust to darkness. And if you've never experienced either, you can think you're quite content living in your bland, dark world. But do you know what's sadder than someone who misses out on something great? Someone who doesn't even know what they're missing. And if you think you're content with the pursuit of happiness without meaning, I believe the words of C.S. Lewis might say it best, where he writes these words: "It would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased." God has so much more than our simple pursuits of bland, dark happiness if we're not far too easily pleased. Let's pray. Father, help